In the Mahabharata, there is a verse that states, "Whatever can be found in this work may be found elsewhere, but whatever cannot be found here cannot be found anywhere." The same is true of Hinduism as a whole. In it we find every possible concept of God and spirituality. The revelation of ancient rishis and indeed current masters has led to immense diversity of belief and practices. This plurality and freedom is in many ways Hinduism's greatest strength. It allows individual seekers of various temperaments to choose the path they connect with most. There are numerous spiritual lineages, different philosophies, and various rituals and techniques. But, strangely, this profound strength is in many ways its greatest weakness. Because of this immense diversity, there is often a lack of unity amongst Hindus. The various branches and movements within Hinduism can create the image of a fragmented and disjointed religion. There are so many gods, scriptures and personalities, all of which mean different things to different Hindus. But this appearance is misleading. Hinduism does have a common foundation among all the branches. There is the Atman or divine self, the law of karma, re-incarnation, a concept of eternal freedom, and the focus on inner spiritual transformation. All of these bind the various movements. The huge diversity that has sprung out of these seeds is not reflective of random chaotic ideas, but rather an immense maturity which appreciates that ultimate truth has many facets and many ways of approaching it. Christianity and Islam spread rapidly through united empires and missionary efforts. But unlike these religions, Hinduism was never meant to bind the masses under one state. Nor was it specifically designed to be marketed to the rest of the world. There was no concept of urgently needing to save non-believers, but rather a strong focus on the individual's inner spiritual journey. This is why Hinduism has no single canonized scripture and philosophy. But despite this, the various individual traditions within Hinduism often face conflict with one another. Throughout history, different masters appeared in response to the needs and the context of the time. These masters often argued, debated, and openly rebelled against other Hindu ideas. If we look back around 500 BC, the Vedic religion had become overly ritualistic and corrupt. In response, the Buddha and others outright rejected the authority of the Vedas. They turned the emphasis away from vain ritual and belief to self-development and finding freedom from suffering. Whilst abandoning many orthodox Hindu ideas, Buddhism and Jainism still continued to hold to concepts like karma, reincarnation, and liberation, which were already present in Vedic scripture. In time, Buddhism spread throughout India to the point where the Vedic religion as a whole became almost eclipsed by it. Eventually, teachers such as Kumarila Bhatta from the Mimamsa school appeared and made philosophical arguments against Buddhist teaching and won people back to the Vedic ritual. At around about the same time, the great Adi Shankaracharya wrote and travelled extensively. Using the Vedic Upanishads, he brought forward arguments establishing his school of Advaita Vedanta. He debated and cemented the supremacy of Vedic knowledge over Vedic ritual and over Buddhism. Eventually, Shankara's philosophy began to take hold, but his idea of an illusory world where the self is totally the same as an impersonal God began to undermine the devotional Bhakti traditions who believed strongly in a loving relationship with a personal God. Ramanuja Acharya as well as others came to the forefront to argue, using the Vedas, why love and surrender to a personal deity is the highest path. Alongside all of this, under the influence of different rulers, there were intense conflicts between Vaishnavas and Shaivites, both of whom were trying to prove the supremacy of their deity over the other. As we can see in this simplistic overview, Hinduism has a whole history of internal disagreements. But this is entirely understandable given the context of those times. Each tradition was trying to strengthen its hold and rally against opposing ideas. Without such a robust response, the traditions would have almost certainly disappeared. But it is important that Hindus realise that that was then, and this is now. Today, the battleground could not be more different. The religious, political and social landscape has completely changed. This is a globalised digital age, a time of social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. We are overrun with endless opinions, facts and philosophical ideas. Secular atheistic beliefs are increasingly being seen as the obvious rational way to live our lives. The average person sees no reason why they should trust the Vedas and other Hindu scripture. We have materialistic cultures centered around celebrities who are venerated like deities. There are political influences where Hinduism is treated differently to other religions. Blinded by the idea that all religions are the same, Hindus are falling victim to strategic and well-financed evangelical Christians operating in India and around the world. They are also vulnerable to Muslims which are seeking to convert, mock and condemn the practices of Hinduism. Academics are bent on changing the narrative of Hinduism and undermining the faith. And there are even media channels who use every opportunity to peddle anti-Hindu propaganda. There are those who shamelessly steal aspects of Hindu philosophy and appropriate them into their own culture and belief systems. This is the real battleground of the 21st century. Unfortunately, today there are still too many dedicated and knowledgeable Hindus who are obsessively fighting old battles with other Hindus. Like a frog in a well, they have become lost in their world, which is utterly divorced from the larger picture. They do not appreciate the real needs of our time. This does not mean they need to throw away their philosophical disagreements. A devotee who sees God as the personal form of Narayana cannot ignore the contradiction with a jnani who states that God is impersonal and without form and qualities. This is a fundamental disagreement. But what the devotee and the jnani can do is recognize that in this time, despite their disagreements, they share a common foundation that needs to be nurtured. They are both born from a glorious dharmic culture, which is all about the individual seeking of truth and realizing firsthand the experience of God. We should remember that one of the most amazing things about Hinduism is that it does not suffer from exclusive truth claims. It does not condemn non-Hindus to an eternity of hell. In place of exclusivity, Hindu traditions have supremacist ideas. Whereas exclusivity sees all other paths as illegitimate and outright wrong, supremacist traditions will see their path as the highest, but at the same time recognize there can be immense value in other paths. This means that a Vaishnava will believe that worship of Narayana is the highest path, a Shaivite will believe worship of Shiva is the highest, a Jnani will believe realizing themselves as the ultimate reality is the highest, and at the same time they will all have the possibility to acknowledge the other as having some value towards spiritual evolution. Just because we see our path as the highest, it does not mean other traditions are wrong. It does not mean we have to look upon other Hindu movements with disdain. This is a critical point. When we understand this, it is quite possible to hold to the principles of our specific tradition and respect the words of previous acharyas, while at the same time having a space in our narrative that realizes the precious foundation that binds us all together as followers of Sanathana Dharma. This is particularly important for the larger Hindu organizations to bear in mind. There can often be a tendency for them to feel they have a monopoly on God, so much so that they strangely isolate themselves from Hinduism as a whole and even become competitive, suspicious and unnecessarily critical of other Hindu movements. We must adopt a perspective where any Hindu movement which is loyal to the spiritual culture and is actively benefiting people is supported and appreciated. For Hindus to spend excessive time and energy trying to find holes in each other's philosophy is petty and short-sighted. The need to endlessly debate the specific interpretation of chapter and verse and find out who is bona fide is dwarfed when we look at the bigger challenges that Hinduism faces. There is no point fighting over who is going to have the privilege of the master bedroom when the very house we are living in is being threatened. As mentioned, the battle has shifted and we need to keep up. The more Hindu groups can show solidarity with one another, the stronger Hinduism will be as a whole, and as a consequence, the stronger each individual group will be. We should understand that the heart of Hinduism lies with the different sampradayas and the messages of different masters. This is where we find the sincere, intense philosophy which guides us to truth. This is where the search for God is most palpable. It is this precious wisdom and energy that needs to be disseminated in a rational, accessible way to the masses, a way that makes sense in a modern world. It is the average Hindu on the ground who is not part of any specific tradition that needs to be strengthened and empowered. They need to be made aware of the value of a spiritual path. They need to know how to articulate it to themselves and to others. The inferiority complex and awkwardness that many Hindus carry needs to be replaced with pride and passion in their faith. They need to be made aware that their spiritual culture is a priceless diamond that needs to be protected. Currently, we are developing a generation who are Hindu by name, but not by nature. They organise large and flamboyant Diwali shows, which are nothing more than an excuse for superficial fashion parades and Bollywood dances. Navaratri nights have become another opportunity to get dressed up and find future partners. Even Hindu societies have become more about sports day gatherings and dinner dates. Instead of imbibing the wisdom of scripture, people are turning to self-help personalities who are often just repackaging Hindu ideas. At the top, we have Hindu Sampradaya traditions which are disunited and aloof from other Hindus, and at the bottom, we have Hindus who have a lazy, live and let live attitude. Both groups are too self-absorbed to perceive the erosion of their religion. This needs to change, and the grace of Hindu Dharma must be brought to the masses. There are so many individuals who feel lost and without purpose, who could derive so much benefit from Hindu ideas and practice. The profound diversity of Hinduism is what makes it so unique and glorious, but we must actively take steps to ensure that this diversity does not become a weakness. It is time for Hindus as a whole to recognise the bigger picture and the pressing needs of the time. Sanathana Dharma carries within it the solution to the human condition, because it carries within it the truth of our existence. Through the united efforts of all Hindus, this truth needs to be gifted to the whole world. Many thanks for listening.